This is my presentation comparing cost studies and consumer-oriented studies. The focus of cost studies is on figuring out the monetary cost of a particular program in relation to the benefits. In other words, did the expense lead to a positive return on investment from the point of view of the client? Advanced organizers that are necessary for cost studies include inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Inputs would be any cost that may be required, outputs any results that may occur from a particular program, and outcomes would be any larger long-term benefits. Identifying how resources are invested and what their immediate and long-term impacts are is one of the main purposes of cost studies. Ensuring that there are positive results for the money invested is one of the main sources of questions. Other questions that also arise involve cost ratios, costs of inputs, and how did the costs of one particular program compare to those of a similar program. There are various methods for cost studies. For example, you can compare a unit of effectiveness in relation to the amount of money or the value of the resources expended. You can also identify certain outcomes and assign them a monetary value and then evaluate whether the benefits outweigh the costs. Pioneers in this approach to evaluation include Levin, Key, Sang, and Yates. The work of various pioneers in the field further highlights the utility of cost studies in many areas. For example, Levin's study in 1998 where he evaluated the effectiveness, choice, and cost of educational vouchers. He was able to identify that vouchers lead to increased costs over the current funding system, among other results. Assistance from experts in accounting, auditing, or economics is important in cost studies due to their complex nature. A main strength of cost studies are the explicit standards and methods that have been used across many years. Weaknesses are that most often than not, people do not want outsiders looking at the financial records, and this limits conducting of this type of study. It is also challenging for an evaluator to place monetary values on certain outcomes, even in consultation with the client, as they may not feel that the value is what the client thinks it is. In the consumer-oriented study approach, there is a direct evaluative conclusion about whatever is being evaluated. The focus is on helping consumers assess worth and merit of programs, services, and products. Advanced organizers include costs, consumer needs, and societal values. The purpose of these studies is to help taxpayers and consumers make choices about what they purchase. Questions for these studies are typically derived from consumers and from the evaluator's frame of reference. One of the main questions of these studies is that of the different options out there. What is the best choice given the cost or any other criteria that may be of interest to the consumer? Methods that are often employed include checklists, needs assessments, and cost analysis, among others. Oftentimes, there are independent consumer advocates involved who are highly credible and competent. They often have access to a large base of information that can be used. Pioneers in this field include Ralph Nader and the organization Consumers Union. In 1965, Nader documented for the public the resistance of the automobile industry to implement safety technology in motor vehicles. Use considerations include that these types of evaluations generally emphasize immediate decision-making and inform a course of action. They do not, however, directly involve relevant stakeholders. Some of the strengths are the fact that these studies are very independent and objective and very comprehensive in assessing worth or merit. Some weaknesses include that there is so much independence that sometimes these types of evaluations, if done too early, can stifle creativity. For example, an evaluation may find fault with a product which has just recently been developed, and the negative publicity may impact the organization financially, causing it not to be able to make any modifications to their product. Some of the important points of contrast between cost studies and consumer-oriented studies are as follows. Cost studies focus on cost versus benefit, whereas consumer-oriented studies focus more on larger evaluative conclusions about an entire program. Cost studies are very narrow in their focus and in the methods that they employ, whereas consumer-oriented studies tend to be very expansive and comprehensive in terms of the question and methods that they use. In considering which of these two approaches would be best for the RUPUS program evaluation, I feel that the consumer-oriented study would be more appropriate and better suited, given that there are multiple questions related to RUPUS evaluation that are being considered by the RUPUS staff. Also, the fact that the consumer-oriented study employs a variety of methods, and it would be a lot more comprehensive in obtaining answers. That being said, one of the limitations of this approach for the RUPUS evaluation would be that the approach would not lend itself to helping the staff improve their program, but may in the end provide information on what is wrong and not what to do to make it better. And here are some references.